With that, we are going to start today's session with some regional perspectives. And we have a couple of honored individuals here. Rod and Brad, if you would please come up to the stage while I kind of give the short script of who you guys are and what you're going to be doing. And just make yourselves comfortable on a chair. So in the Pacific Northwest, apprenticeship is managed differently across our states and countries, frankly. This morning, we've assembled a panel of leaders to give you a snapshot of how apprenticeship works across the region. And I would like you to please join me in welcoming Rod Bianchini, Interim Chief Operating Officer from British Columbia Industry Training Authority. Rod? And with Rod on his left is Brad Avakian, Commissioner, Oregon Bureau of Labor and Industries. And Brad, I believe this is your swan song, as I understand.
It kind of is. We're nearing the end.
Right.
It's been a great 10 years.
Right. And I have had a chance to get to know Brad over the years. I present to the Oregon Council on occasion, and Brad has been quite a champion for career and technical education and registered apprenticeship in the state of Oregon. So without further ado, I'm going to ask each of these individuals, and Rod, since you've come the farthest, I'll let you go first. And since Brad and I are kind of hosting you here. So, but we do appreciate you coming down. And if you could just kind of give us your overview perspective on registered apprenticeship in your world.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can do that from sitting.
Oh, can I do?
Yeah.
I'll stand.
Okay.
Those are kind of funky chairs.
Yeah.
So thank you, everyone. I'm really excited to be here to learn and share and contribute to apprenticeship and apprenticeship pathways and just all the information in the room. Nice to hear that you're a sheet metal journey person. I'm a certified roofer, and we were the ones that always blamed the sheet metal workers for putting holes in our roofs. But it did keep us employed, which was really good. Yeah, I know you've done that. So just a little bit of stats and numbers for you. BC currently has 37,000 registered apprentices in the province of British Columbia, of which 5,000 of those are participating in the youth programs. The labor market outlook for province of BC right now over the next 10 years is about 900,000 job openings, of which 71,000 of those are going to be in the trades. So we have a perfect storm if it hasn't already happened. The employers are really feeling the pinch in the province of British Columbia. There's a lot of competition for trades workers. There's a lot of competition for certified trades workers. And there's a lot of competition for apprenticeships as well. We've always been focused on helping apprentices and employers throughout their apprenticeship journey. And in British Columbia, there's over 10,000 employers that are registered within our system. But that's only one side of the story. When you look at industries and employers that are in the trades, only 1 in 5 actually hire and register apprentices. So that's our challenge, really. So if you look at those numbers, I think we share a lot of similar challenges throughout the Pacific Northwest around these issues. So some of the initiatives that we've started, about 4 years ago, we organized and hired an apprenticeship advisor team and put them in the field. We have 15 regional advisors across the province that have an office and an exposure and a presence. They're there to really coach and help sponsors and apprentices through their apprenticeship pathway. We also have an industry relations team that is industry specific. Their job is really to be the front door for industry for ITA. We find this is one of the vital links right now, and we're actually currently modernizing our engagement model as we speak. We think industry really and employers specifically are the key to advancing apprenticeship. Really, an apprenticeship doesn't exist without an employer willing to take on an apprentice and train them. And it's really from an organizational point of view, there I go again, oh God, not used to this. From an organizational point of view, we really have to try to rise to those challenges and really try to figure out how we can expose more employers to the apprenticeship pathway, make them understand the advantages of it, not only from an employment point of view, but also the benefit to the individual through their learning pathway. Those two teams work together in addition to leveraging all our internal teams like training and investment and completions to really create regional workshops that are across the board spectrum. So these regional workshops and initiatives that we have can start from simple information where we gather industry within their region, so it could be in northern BC, southern BC, and we actually sit down and talk about what it is to be an apprentice, how, challenges that the employers are having in that area, right to a very specific workshop with a specific sector or industry. And one of my examples is the automotive industry that's gone through some changes right now. We gathered a regional workshop, sat down with employers. But at all of these workshops and regional events, the key piece is always apprenticeship pathway. Is there an opportunity to engage employers at a higher level and a more specific level? And can we create a momentum and an apprenticeship culture for BC? We're also very, very committed to making the trades welcoming and inclusive. A diverse and safe environment for us, for women and underrepresented groups, is extremely important. In fact, one of our mandate items from our government this year was to impact cultural change. We have partnerships with community groups and networks that support women and underrepresented groups, including Indigenous people in trades training. One of the keys to this is really the collaborative approach that we've taken as a strategy within those regions. Instead of creating a provincial standard and saying this is the one you must meet, we create a provincial standard and then go to the region and say, let's talk about how this fits, which is a different approach than we usually have had in the past. Leveraging the teams that I just mentioned is really key to this. We've also been working with Indigenous communities to increase Indigenous participation in the trades. Currently, we have 7% of our apprentices registered are Indigenous, and 3,500 women are currently registered in the province of British Columbia as apprentices. Thank you. We could do better. That's all I'm going to say. Our initiatives are really focused on the learner and the apprenticeship success. One of the things we're really proud of is the completions initiatives through our completions department. And really, around 2014, we created a completions department to address apprentices in our system that were stuck, disappeared, just continue working but haven't finished. So we honed it down to one of the strategies, one of the initial strategies was say, okay, let's look at all the apprentices that have completed all of their requirements but have not been signed off yet, and why. So we have this database that shows these individuals, and they all look really cool on the database because they all, they have everything, but it doesn't reflect the reality of their life. So through a campaign, a very simple campaign of gathering the information of how many of these apprentices there were in the province, dividing them up between the regions so the advisors could actually literally cold call and visit them and say, hey, what's going on with your apprenticeship? You've completed your schooling, you've completed your hours. That last step, don't you want your certification? And the answers we got back were across the spectrum from, I don't want to do this anymore, which is great, to, I didn't know that had to be done. I don't have an employer anymore to sign me off. And so one of the things two things happened. There was that outreach and that connection, but also the information that came back to ITA enabled us to really hone our strategies to say, okay, you know what, there's some things we might need to do differently. And I'm really proud to say that through that initiative over the 4 years, 4,500 apprentices received their certificate of qualification or their red seal. And these 4,500 most of them probably would not have reached that certification. A lot of the comments we got back, a lot of the feedback, even from the employer community, was that, wow, this was great. I never realized that it was just this little piece that needed to be done. And so there's a lot of misinformation still. So learners are really the center of what we do at ITA. We got a customer service model that's comprehensive. I mentioned some departments within ITA, and really we work together as a team. I mentioned 2 out-facing teams, the advisors and industry engagement, but really they could not do anything without all the departments that we have internally. The foundation of what we do is the apprenticeship pathway. We see sponsor employers and industry as a vital key component to it, as equal to as the apprentice that's going through it. We do not ignore the fact that there are a ton of other organizations around that center that support apprenticeship, and we're charged with managing that system. So I encourage you today, if you're not already doing so, to reach out to your partners, to work together for your region, your city, or your state, and encourage innovative ways to help apprentices succeed. My desire is to create an apprenticeship culture that is inclusive, relevant, and sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So Brad, would you like to sit or stand? All right.
Thanks, Jody. Good morning, everybody. I want to thank you on behalf of Oregon for inviting us to share a couple thoughts this morning. And at the same time, I let you know that it's just so good to be a part of a Northwest coalition like this that is a great partner for us in doing everything that it can to make sure that we are attracting and graduating as many people who want to learn and work as possible. In Oregon, we have a legislature that has recently said that in the next session starting next year, it wants to do everything it can to help support our efforts in expanding apprenticeship, and that's something that our Bureau has been committed to for some time. I want to recognize, or at least introduce to you, the Oregon team that's here. Steve Sims, our apprenticeship director, and the rest of the team. If you don't mind standing up for just a second. Steve, wave your hand. Here we are. We'll have, I guess, a more general discussion about apprenticeship up here today. Steve is our state's leading expert on everything apprenticeship. And so if you're curious about how we attract apprentices, what the registration process is like, what we're doing to help them graduate successfully, if you want the specifics, make sure you introduce yourself to Steve. But we are committed in Oregon to making sure we get as many people into apprenticeship programs as we possibly can. In recent years, that has meant expanding our supportive services program. We've been able to grow that fund in cooperation with our state legislature. Our supportive services program has money available to help underwrite some of the costs of apprenticeship that have been traditional obstacles for people. It helps pay for transportation, for child care, for tools, and for the like. And because of our outreach efforts otherwise, and because of that program, we now have just around 10,000 apprentices in Oregon, which is the highest number of apprentices that the state has ever seen. Even better than that, it's enabled us to break down some of the traditional barriers for people who haven't always participated in apprenticeship. We now have twice the national average of women participating in apprenticeship programs in Oregon. And that's partially because of that. It's also because of the efforts of folks like Connie Ashbrook, who I think is here. Connie, you should stand up and wave for a second. Through her great work with Oregon tradeswomen, we've been able to attract women and give them the support network they need in order to graduate successfully from programs. That supportive services program has also enabled us to attract more people of color to apprenticeship, and at just under 20% now, the state has its highest number of people of color participating in apprenticeship programs as well. But even with that, we know to have a sustained and a successful effort at training people for good jobs, we can't just be attracting people that are in their late 20s and 30s to apprenticeship. It starts well before that. So about 6 years ago, we partnered with our Department of Education to create a grant fund with brand new money for our public schools in order to bring 21st century shop classes back to our middle schools and high schools. And in those 6 years, we've been able to see more than 500 schools in Oregon restore shop class. Now that's meant some of the traditional programs like wood shop and metal shop, even some home ec programs in our schools. But we've also seen programs like pre-nursing, biomedical engineering, advanced computer-aided design, and we've seen it in the rural schools as well as the urban schools in our state. We're not going to stop with that effort until every single middle school and high school has got a program back. Now, I want to share with you one of those programs just because I think it's an interesting program. It shows how we're combining traditional construction skills with 21st century high-tech skills. In the town of Bend, which sits right in the middle of our state, they've started a new program in sustainability. And in this program, all the students start the year learning advanced computer-aided design skills. They sit down at a computer and they actually design an electrical vehicle. And then they move in the next part of the class to the shop where they learn how to weld. And they get the materials and they actually build the frame of this car that they just designed on the computer. And then in the next part of the class, they learn physics, propulsion systems, and they take an electric motor and they install it in the frame that they just built. And at the end of the class, every single student has got a functioning electric car. Well, it really isn't the end of the class, because then they take them about 30 miles down the road to the track at Redmond and they race the cars that they just built. It is a great program that teaches a skill that will give a kid a profession, a good paying profession for life. I want to thank you again for inviting us. We value the partnership that we have with everybody in the Northwest with this coalition. We're grateful to continually be learning from everything that you all are doing in your regions. And we look forward to continuing that partnership as we all move forward. Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you both. And as a follow-up, and I believe, Shayna, you had some mics in case the audience had any questions. Could we? I've got a couple of questions, but just as a setup, I'll have Shayna grab some microphones in case anybody out there has a burning question. So while we've got you here, and it's a fairly unique opportunity to hear from Canada and our Oregon partners, so I guess you've recounted some of the initiatives that are going on, and if you could both just kind of speak to, current initiatives you are particularly proud of that are working to just expand registered apprenticeship. If you can focus on a particular initiative that you feel has been fairly effective, and then what about it has been effective in terms of growing this registered apprenticeship system and bringing new employers in. And just, from where you are, Brad, maybe you can take that one on first.
Well, you I suppose, somewhat answered the question with the question, in that expansion, we really think, is the key. Oregon, like a lot of regions and states, is very heavy on the construction trades in its apprenticeship, and we all know that when you look at the history of apprenticeship dating back over 1,000 years, that virtually all of the different professions that you see in society had some type of a system for training people from a very young age. And so we have put out a concerted effort to build relationships in different industry sectors, to have our legislature and our governor's office be focusing in that direction too. And we've seen some success. We now see new programs, apprenticeship programs in the healthcare industry, in software design, in IT support, in agriculture, and we want to continue expanding that. We think it'll certainly not just give pathways to people when they're younger, but will just provide a better trained, more ready local workforce across numerous industry sectors, which makes for a more stable and stronger economy for your state.
Right. So just a quick follow-up, Brad. Is your legislature putting incentives in place? You mentioned that there's a lot of political will. So do you have any tangible incentives that are drawing employers into this space, or is it the tight labor market?
Well, I suppose we'll see, right? You know, like I'm sure a lot of you feel your whatever agency in your state is in charge of apprenticeship has in many ways been going at it alone for a long time and doing the best you can. And in many ways, that's been how it's been in Oregon too. And I think our success with the high school programs, some success in community college programs, the growth that our agency has been able to achieve in apprenticeship has sparked a new interest from our legislature and our governor's office. There's not a specific plan yet, but certainly there is talk about expanding the number of apprenticeship positions we have in our agency, devoting more money to training efforts, and we'll be continuing to encourage them to be more specific and give as much money as they can in the 2019 session. But I can't say that they've articulated the plan yet.
Okay, well, thank you. Rod, same question.
I think in Canada, we are part of a bigger network. We tie into a national Red Seal program. There's a lot of, we've got mobility legislation around the movement of workers across the provinces. So in that regard, we're quite linked with all the other provinces. But in terms of expanding apprenticeship, really, one of the focuses that we have as an organization is really looking at the apprenticeship system as a whole, and not just an apprenticeship. You know, who's involved in it, the employer sponsors, the institutions that train them at technical training, organizations that are extremely important to not only support the message, but send the message about apprenticeship. So specifically, one of the things that we're quite proud of is our youth programs. We've expanded them to 4, which engage students as early as grade 5. And culminate in the final 2 steps of either train in trades or work in trades, where someone can transition right from grade 12 into an apprenticeship, and during their grade 11, 12 year have dual credit, so they could be working, getting an apprenticeship. So that's one of them. The other one is really a couple of initiatives that we're starting right now through our organization is a concerted effort towards employer sponsors and really understanding who they are, and I'll clarify that. Really, when we look at who sponsors apprentices, we've come up with 3 categories. We have the current champions, which are, you know, they're bought in, they're engaged, and they register apprentices. There's the lapsed sponsors for whatever reason. There could be disengagement there, or there just could be an economic reason why they can't take on another apprentice, because an apprenticeship is not an apprenticeship without an employment, right? And then there's the sponsors that are just non-sponsors, and the ones that you meet at functions that say, well, why should I sponsor an apprentice, and are totally disengaged. So, and it's really creating an overall strategy about sponsor engagement, but breaking it down specifically to those 3 groups, and then taking that out to the field. So that's another initiative. The other one we are starting on as well is what we call MUSH. Basically, it's all the government. All government and government employers, so universities, schools, hospitals, and ministries. And what we did is we did a bit of an environmental scan as to, you know, why do they traditionally not hire apprentices? A lot of hospitals that need trades workers, like what's going on here? So we're digging into that piece and kind of looking at it from that point of view. So those are a couple of initiatives that we think will expand apprenticeship. But also working with institutions, right? Institutions that deliver our technical training, and engaging them and how they engage industry, and being part of that conversation. You know, understanding very clearly that we are part of a bigger system, and that our value is to have informative, facilitative discussions at times, but also drive a standard and make sure people understand that this is the standard that you got to, you know, that we've established. Also leveraging other organizations that do it well. You know, the unions, we have organizational sponsors that do it really well. So partnering with them on certain events, partnering with organizations at events that target apprenticeship. And lastly, taking care of the work that keeps the lights on. And I think it often goes, you know, we want these strategies, but really taking care of, you know, a flexible mobile standard that maintains credibility to the credential, innovation. We're currently going through an innovation exercise with our training and investment department right now. We're looking at different ways to bring training to communities, different ways of engaging apprentices so that they can be successful and in turn have the sponsors come in. I hope that answers.
Yeah, that did. Wonderful.
Okay.
So two themes, and I don't know if folks picked up on that, but certainly two themes emerged from your comments to me. One is collaboration. You can't do this alone. You've got to have other agencies, other entities involved, and you certainly have to have the employers at the table. And youth seemed to be a theme that cut across both of your comments, and I will echo that for Washington. We understand, and when we went after these recent federal grant monies that were put on the table, coming forward with a strong partnership was key to winning those funds. And so we are definitely in line with your two perspectives in terms of building that community of practice. And I think through that work, you get the legislative support. You get intangibles that come out of that from the energy that's developed in those partnerships. So as we kind of wrap up here in this session, I just want to pose one more question to you folks. Because we're here and everybody's sitting comfortably and they're all relaxed, but we don't want them to leave here and be comfortable and relaxed. We want them to do things. We want a call to action. So if you could put something in these folks' ears in terms of a call to action for either local initiatives or collaborating across regions. And I know this kind of puts you on the spot, but in your experience and the wealth of knowledge that you have, I mean, is there a little gem you could leave with these folks in terms of going forward? What do we need to tackle? And I'll let you think about that for just a half a second. Whoever thinks they might have a response, speak up.
Well, go right ahead. You're right ahead, Rod.
Apprenticeships are a viable learning pathway, and we have to put them at par with any other viable learning pathway.
I would second that motion.
I would add, be proactive. And when you look around this room, you've got folks that have developed their skills through the trades, gone through apprenticeship themselves. You've got agency directors. This is probably the greatest brain trust anywhere in the Northwest in how to get people excited about apprenticeships and be successful in them. It's like anything in life. It's not just going to happen on its own. Somebody needs to light the spark. If you want new programs in the healthcare industry, go out and set up meetings with folks in the healthcare industry and talk to them about apprenticeship. If you want to get younger people involved, go to some of your successful apprenticeship programs and ask them to go do after-school programs in your high schools and middle schools. We've got programs in Oregon where I know that the folks from the sheet metal program are going there after school and teaching kids how to work with metal. We've got folks in our IBEW's apprenticeship program that are assisting with robotics programs around the state. In those programs, and the ones I mentioned earlier about high schools, more than 90% of those students that are involved in those programs are graduating on time with a high school degree, and they do so knowing exactly where they can go next in order to continue getting trained. It's all about building relationships, and that doesn't happen unless you're proactive about it.
Nice, nice, very nice.
Yeah, building relationships.